our meeting, our conference. Hello, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I am Pierluigi Panza. I will be your moderator for today. For the sessions of the morning and afternoon, we have simultaneous translation service, so you can collect the headsets at the entrance. Today, we have a very dense day. We have several short presentations, and I would like them to get straight to the point so that we can go one after the other. Today, our theme is saving Venice and its lagoon and how to restart and build back better. And this is organized by the Association of International Private Committees for the Safeguarding of Venice, together with Europa Nostra. And this is within the framework of the European Cultural Heritage Summit that will be held in Venice today and for the next 2 days, with several initiatives. And the very last day, we will have the ministry coming over for his presentation. And I would also like to thank Fondazione Cini for hosting us. And we will just go straight ahead. You know how the International Private Committees for the Safeguarding of Venice are 27 committees. Some of them, for about half a century, have taken charge of safeguarding the city of Venice, and some others are younger. And then Europa Nostra is an association that was born in '63 of European citizens, and it's about programs and best practices in the field of heritage, and joining forces with Europeans. And now I would like to leave the floor to Paola Marini, who is the president of the Association of International Private Committees for the Safeguarding of Venice. Thank you, Pierluigi Panza.
Neither English nor French, but I prefer, if you forgive me, I prefer to speak Italian. La prospettiva.
The perspective by Europa Nostra about the World Heritage Committee of the last July 22nd, and we commented the decision of the Italian government to block the cruise ships of in the Canale of the Giudecca Canal in Venice. I think that that was a way to show that an infamous case of a site in peril, of a World Heritage Site in peril, now it can become a success story. And so this was the starting point, the hint that we decided to have this Heritage Summit. And the international private committees, as said before, we have 27 committees out of 12 countries. Some of them have been operating for many years. Some others don't have the logo here, but I hope that there's their names. And they joined membership in the last few years, also because they were established just a few years ago. And so also the Association of Committees, the association is the only city member of Europa Nostra. And so I am president since 2018, after Sir Ashley Clark, Alvise Zorzi, and Umberto Marcello Del Mairo, that were the previous chairpersons. And the association was thrilled by the opportunity given by Europa Nostra to become promoter of this meeting, and the final remarks will be brought to the attention of the people at the Agora of the last day, September 24th, with the Italian Ministry of Culture, who is the first minister that organized a culture G20. And so there are many themes that are very well known by Venetians, and in this vision of the new European Bauhaus, this new European Renaissance, we must have urban centers at the center of our debate. For over 50 years, we have promoted Venice, and this is an identity document for our association. We have always been very stable and calm, but very devoted to restoration, research, training, education, and also at the same time we have kept an eye on the lagoon, on the city, on the citizens. And with this vision, this is the work that we've been carrying out for the past 50 years. And Venice and its lagoon are one single body, and with many urgencies and with many challenges that we are faced every day. And as many other historical cities, it can provide high quality of life because it's rich of architectural, cultural heritage, and at the same time you can reach within 15 minutes on foot any possible site, universities, research institutes, and other bodies. And this is a melting pot of several experiences. So we are sure that we have several open themes about the future of Venice, and these can be answered to only with a shared position, with no controversies. We do not need solo actions, even though solo actions can be good as well. But we have to share interventions and behaviors, and also talking about the civitas, which means the city that is lived by its own citizens, and also many initiatives that must be shared by the decision makers and policy makers, as well as the citizens and those who enjoy the great heritage that the city is presenting. And the time is now. Perhaps the time has already gone by, but now we have new visions and new energies that are now broadening after the pandemic. And now we have the project of making Venice the capital of sustainability and making this city the Bauhaus of the seas. And also this will be a theme that will be dealt with during the first 2 days of this very event. And also in terms of economy and healthcare, we know that this city can provide several answers. We know that this can provide the just visibility to culture, especially in these times. Also, we have several scenarios, like the one that was drawn by the Ursula von der Leyen, and also during the first Culture G20 held in Rome at the end of July. In today's forum, we would like to give voice according to time and place with the main actors, stakeholders, the civil society, that is our common point with Europa Nostra, and the economic fabric, and the decision makers and policy makers, and the academic world. And you know, the academic world is not the last, of course. It's last but not least. So not everyone was able to participate because, unfortunately, we didn't have the possibility to give a proper notice, but in proper times. But so in terms of the committees, we will as an association of international private committees, we all joining forces, we have drawn up our appeal for Venice that also is taking into consideration what Leo Schubert said, and it's about diversification, deepness, and depth and many other issues, and this is a work in progress situation. So if anyone would like to add something more or a remark, something else, we can add any of your comments and opinions into this appeal that we will provide later on in time to the decision makers. So I would also like to thank the Secretary General of Europa Nostra, Sneska Mihailovic, and also I would like to thank Carla Toffolo for her extraordinary work, and also Fondazione Cini, all the speakers, and the Professor Pierluigi Panza that I would like to introduce to you later on, Federico Olivares, Simon Important, that are generously supporting the appeal of Venice for, and also Carla Toffolo that did her best to make this meeting possible. And I would like to thank you all and wish you a fruitful session. And Mr. Pierluigi Panza is Professor of Art Criticism at the University of Milan Politecnico, and he won a Capello Award, and he's chief editor of a magazine about preservation, and also he has made several publications, and last but not least, he's a reporter for the Corriere della Sera for cultural articles. Thank you very much for being with us today. Thank you. Thank you, Paola. The private committees and citizens, and is also the center of Europa Nostra. So I would like to leave the floor to the Secretary General of Europa Nostra, Sneska Mihailovic. Good morning, everyone. It is a great honor and a great emotion for me to be here today and be the spokesperson today for Europa Nostra. Today, this morning, Europa Nostra is the voice of civil society for cultural heritage. Thank you so much, Paola, for this beautiful speech. I don't have anything else to add, actually.
That we will be singing all the time duet. And so she was singing in Italian, and I will be singing in English. I just want to say to you how excited Europa Nostra is to organize its very first physical meeting since the outbreak of the pandemic in this city. And I think you all understand what a statement we are making by choosing Venice for the sort of the summit of the recovery, the summit which is calling for the new European Renaissance. So Venice is the place that has inspired also the birth of our movement, our family. And we want Venice to be also the symbol of that renewal of our joint action for putting culture and cultural heritage at the very heart of Europe's recovery and of very heart of our future. And that's why I am really delighted also that Fondazione Cini, such an eminent institution that celebrates 70th anniversary this year, has kindly accepted to host this important debate here. So full of symbolism and full of hope, I would say. And that in the year when Venice celebrates its 1,600th year of its existence. So how can we think that Venice might not be here anymore? So Venice also has a future, but it can only have a future if we all join our forces, we join our voices, and Europa Nostra precisely would like to play that role of a catalyst That is the role that we are playing all around Europe. We cannot do things on your behalf, but we can help you to put all those creative energies, innovative ideas. And since I have arrived here in Saturday, I could feel that there is so much willingness and eagerness here in this city to indeed build back better for Venice, for Italy, and for the whole of Europe. So we are here, and this morning a large delegation of Europa Nostra is attending this meeting, members of our board and of our council, led by, I see, our executive vice president, Guy Claus from Luxembourg. I see also our senior vice president, Androula Vassiliou from Cyprus, but many of them are here. But we are here this morning to listen. Because Europa Nostra is all about partnership between civil society organizations, and that's why we have full confidence, and we have endorsed the idea that Comitati Privati per la salvaguardia di patrimonio culturale in Venezia should be the convener, organizer of this part of our summit, because you are our ambassadors here in Venice. Of course, we have other eminent Italian organizations, Italia Nostra, one of our founding member organizations, Fondo Ambiente Italiano, Touring Club Italiano, and other organizations. But you are, in fact, our ambassadors and our very active member, and also laureate of one of our European Heritage Awards. So we have full trust that you can sort of help us to play this role of a catalyst in a positive spirit and in a sense of hope. In spite of all the threats that this city is facing, we believe that if we put the forces together, that we can find solutions. And just the last word, of course, it is the civil society that is, we are giving during this morning, and not morning, also in the afternoon, but in particularly giving a lot of space to the voices of the civil society. And there, among the organizations that will be speaking, we have people who are coming representing organizations that are active for hundreds of years, and others that are just very new, an expression of a civic activism. And I think the beauty of this is to put all those civic voices and civil society forces together, and that is what we want to hear. And as civic Comitati Privati, you are our ambassadors in Venice. We want to be your ambassadors in Europe. And that's why it's extremely important that we have here the European Investment Bank Institute represented. As you know, in 2016, we have declared Venice the most endangered site in Europe. So whoever still doubts whether Venice is in danger or not, we all know it is, but it's not to talk about danger. We want to talk about opportunities and solutions. And also in the afternoon, we will have a representative of the European Parliament connecting online, because we want to bring these messages from this meeting today to the European Parliament and to other representatives of the European institutions. So count on us as your ambassador, and we will count on you as the ambassadors of Europa Nostra's messages in this most magical, unique city in the world. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sniska. Well, let's now start with the proposals by the civil society. So we now have several representatives of the private committees active in Venice. Due to time reasons, we can allow approximately 4 minutes for each speaker, and then we will have the possibility of exchanging business cards and speak to each other. So this is just an opportunity to briefly introduce the projects and the proposals. So it is not an in-depth analysis. And the first speaker is Sebastiano Cognolato, president of Venice Calls, which is an association that was set up in 2018 with the purpose of promoting projects in the Lagoon and in the Venice area. So, Mr. Cugnolato, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paola. Thank you, Carla. Thank you, Europa Nostra, for gathering us all here today. Well, I believe I'm dreaming. It is really unbelievable to be here. First of all, because I almost missed the ferry and ran the risk of not making it, but also because it is incredible for an association like ours to be included in such an eminent panel of speakers. So thank you very much. Well, we have recently experimented the service of civil protection in our city. I'm referring to the high waters in 2019, when we realized that our city has huge problems in managing the so-called civitas, or civic life, during these emergencies. That was an evident emergency. The whole world could appreciate it. Just like everybody knows what a problem plastic waste is. And everybody knows that Venice is a very special city, and the barriers, unfortunately, tend to attract plastic materials. And with time, we have realized, however, that Venice has many different emergencies. The cultural emergency, for instance, young people really do not have a stage where they can perform. So our association has tried to put together the different associations of young people to create a network with the inclusion of citizens in a process of change. The change of our city, which is not only the thermometer for mankind in terms of future developments, but is relevant for its city, for its history and future. And the citizens play a very important role. Whenever I travel, I am really proud to say I come from Venice. I went as a volunteer in Guatemala, and there I was ashamed to say that I come from Venice, because at that time I didn't have any specific responsibility towards my city. But I'm glad today, and I would like to thank all the young people who try to do something day after day. They give some of their time, say, to disseminate awareness, to do something for the future generations and for the old generations as well, who need to be reminded of the fact that we have to save the world, and we can only do that together. So thank you very much for your introduction and the kind words. The only way to save the world is also to save Venice, and to save Venice we have to act together so that our future is a bright one. So thank you very much once again, and all the best. I wish you profitable proceedings. Every association will provide you with a written document, and I believe that it was a wonderful idea to ask us to take part in this event and to invite the different voices of the civil society. I did not expect that, and it was a wonderful surprise. So thank you very much, and let's save together the city of Venice. Thank you very much. That was Venice Calls, with a pedagogic commitment and aiming at disseminating awareness amongst young people. Venice is a city that is not only losing inhabitants, but especially children and young people. I think that children are not allowed to play in the narrow lanes of the city. So thank you very much to Venice Calls for involving the youngest. I would like now to leave the floor to Mrs. Francesca Barbini, head of the FI delegation in Venice. FI is the Italian Foundation for the Italian environment, founded by Giulia Maria Crespi in 75, the unforgettable lady who's done so much, and I had the honor of being a friend of hers, also because my parents come from an area where she used to have some properties. Good morning, and thank you very much to all of you. Thank you very much to Fondazione Cini, to Paola Marini, President of Private Committees, and thank you very much to Sneska Mihalovic. Thank you for organizing this summit right here. This is a very important summit. All studies show that the consequence of climate change is devastating. In the last 50 years, the number of catastrophes related to meteorological events has increased fivefold, and we need to act quickly. We need to undertake a radical change in our economies in a very short period of time. These are the words of the Italian president of the cabinet in Athens at the virtual forum of the most important economies about climate and energy promoted by Joe Biden. And I was stricken by these words because they view the environment in a different way. So my short presentation has the purpose of transforming the prospect we have to start from when we talk about Venice. Many projects about the future of our city are based on the certainty that Venice will always be there and will always be available. However, we have to remember that our city has tried to tackle environmental issues with many different techniques and technologies. Venice has innovated, has tried to adapt to natural forces, or has tried to modify the environment to survive and to increase wealth. This has been done in hundreds and hundreds of years, with the exception of the last century. Porto Marghera, with its industries, and the development of harbors and ports that bring huge cruise ships into the lagoon, and the building of Mosey are the most relevant human activities that have characterized the past century. No actions have been undertaken to counteract the obvious consequences of all these actions affecting the balance between the city and the lagoon, a balance that is the guarantee of the future of the city. So today, Venice has to tackle the so-called predatory tourism. This has taken away from the city houses, public services. Think about public transport, which is absolutely necessary in a city where private transport means are available only for mass tourism, but also private and social activities have been replaced only partially by all what mass tourism demands. Live in the city without wealth, live in the city with desolation, exploiting the past of the city without envisaging a future. Bearing in mind all this, together with the devastating consequences Prime Minister Draghi mentions, the future existence of Venice cannot be taken for granted. And this is the upside-down beginning of a project of FAI, our foundation, which is perfectly aware of the destiny and of the future of Venice. Casa Bortoli has been recently acquired by FAI in Venice. It is a building of the 20th century on Canal Grande in a historical palace, and this will become a cultural forum where it will be possible to exchange ideas for the future of a city in peril. It will host intellectual conversations, at multidisciplinary level, focusing on Venice, giving priority to competence rooted in knowledge. And the first of these meetings will take place on an iconic date for Venice. It is the 21st of November, dedicated to the Madonna of Health, with an expert who knows perfectly well the hydrodynamic balance of the lagoon, together with another famous scholar of the lagoon who's here with us today and whom I would like to thank, whom we have met on her small boat fighting big cruise boats like David and Goliath. And if you remember, David actually won her first battle. So we know how special our city is and how modern its civic society is, and how Venetians and we as Venetians want to restart based on this unicity, developing our activities on knowledge and competence, a competence that has gone missing, unfortunately, when decisions were made in the recent past. But hopefully, this competence and knowledge will come to the foreground as indispensable means when the new authority for the lagoon is coming into office. Venice deserves a government that is aware of its decisions. The people who govern the city must know the city, the history, the morphology, and the mechanisms of this city that have guaranteed life and prosperity to this jewel, which is unique in the world for its immense artistical, historical heritage, and for its environmental balance, which has been neglected for too many years. Thank you.
Grazie al FAI.
Thank you very much to FAI. So Casa Bortoli is now participating in the different activities, including the Carlo Scarpa's Olivetti building that FAI has already reopened to the public. I think that they have taken care of this for the last 10 years. Now the floor to the Municipal Councillor Giovanni Andrea Martini, representing the program Tutta la città insieme, the whole city together, which is part of the Agenda Venice 2030 and touches upon several important fields such as residence, tourism, sustainability. And I would like to ask Mr. Giovanni Andrea Martini to talk about this. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the organizers, the civil society voices, for inviting me here today to take part in this meeting that is a really important one. It is an exchange 360 degrees about the future of the city in this very sensitive historical moment. So we've been asked to present concrete proposals for a social and cultural rebirth of Venice. It is not an easy task, because if we want to be concrete, we should clarify first how the city is going to be governed in the next few years, how it is going to tackle the multiple consequences of climate change, with environmental, social, and economic consequences that are related to such changes. If the economic and political forces at local, regional, and national level go on exploiting the heritage of our city with projects that only have a sustainable facade, then there is no premise for a real cultural and social rebirth. And I'm not telling this because I'm a pessimist, but because I am realistic. I mean, living in the city, you realize that market dynamics are supported and they're greenwashed because this has become politically correct. After the comeback of exploitative tourism, in the last few months, the lagoon has been attacked by tourism through different attempts trying to open new possibility of access into the city and opening up new possibilities of building activities. Tourism is fundamental, but 30 million visitors per year, 500 visitors per inhabitant, make urban life non-existent. Therefore, for the survival of the social context, it is necessary to mandate a compulsory booking system for each visit. I mean, the city we want is not the city of exploitation. It is the city where people live. We would like a city to live on its multiple inhabitants, not only multiple visitors. And we would like to have a city that is aware of the times that we're experiencing, a city that tackles the climate emergency, to plan investments and actions. It is necessary to have a strategy of mitigation, and this is the new possibility for Venice. So we take on this difficult task, and we're here to present our proposals for a cultural and social rebirth of our city. First of all, Venice should start from its own community, and this is only possible at different levels. The civic and political level, for instance. It is necessary to restore the participation of citizens through the bodies envisaged by the Statute of Venice, and it is necessary to promote projects for the management of the public good in the hands of citizens' associations. There are already some examples, but they must be multiplied. Number two, the social level. It is necessary to promote the exchange so that we can get to know each other and develop relations. I am thinking about the possibility for residents to organize their lunches and dinners in the squares. I mean, this may seem something little to you, but it is the way to contrast isolation, to promote exchange, and to disseminate the idea that together we can do things. It is then necessary to make all public spaces available to young people and residents to promote projects of socialization, creativity, and active citizenship that can self-sustain or sustain themselves in time and develop together with the different associations in the area. It is necessary to create areas where elderly people can meet. These are predominantly indoor spaces, but there is also the possibility of organizing this in the squares so that public spaces can be given back to the citizens. Venice has always been an outdoor city, and reconquering this dimension means greening the tradition. Number three, the cultural level. It is necessary to promote international cooperation amongst agencies and institutions to attract and fund research so that young people can find jobs. Culture is also employment. And it is a paradox that a city like Venice, with its cultural and environmental heritage, does not see that. Technological innovation and cultural innovation are also paramount. Given its urban morphology, Venice can become the ideal place for digital economy and the creative industry. But for this, you need spaces and places which do exist. We just need a policy of urban regeneration. There are some private spaces. However, it is difficult to have access to them due to ancient mechanisms. Some cultural institutes have got such a space, and they should relate more with citizens, developing cultural promotion projects. And then we have some public spaces owned by the state, which should be recovered since they are not used. But we do not mean that this should be done through speculations in the building industry, but relying on the fact that Venice has sufficiently wide areas that can be used for the tertiary industry, for craftsmen, for agricultural productions. There are many examples, such as the arsenal, for instance, just to name one of them. Thinking about their conversion, one immediately thinks that private investors are necessary. Conversely, we believe that participation is paramount and self-recovery is an excellent idea. This would generate local employment rather than being to the benefit of large international entrepreneurs. These are just ideas and proposals, but they give you an idea of the type of rebirth we are thinking about, which is what the city needs. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I wish you profitable proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martini. It is a broad program, very ambitious, but the suggestion of managing public assets by private people, I think that in Venice, these could be thought about from right away, actually. The next speaker is Mr. Giampaolo Scarante, who is the chairperson of Ateneo Veneto, which is a historical association founded in 1812. They have an extraordinary library, and they are also eager in the field of disseminating scientific knowledge. Thank you for your invitation and also for this very conference that is showing the most important weapon that we have to speak about Venice, the possibility to openly speak about our ideas and opinions. I today speak to you as a member of the Venetian civil society. Civil society is at the moment demographically decreasing in number, and we are losing our vitality because in the Venice city center we have less than 50,000 people living in the city. I represent an establishment, an institution that started its activity in Venice in 1812, but many associations and institutions that in Venice are promoting culture, from Remiere to high culture and international conferences and Tintoretto and all the rest. There are many of these institutions that are very keen on creating culture in Venice. And what I would like to highlight is that this institution's role is not perfectly understood. Often the role of these institutions is just something more, something a little plus, or a form of touristic promotion, but this is not it. Their action of these institutions making culture in Venice, and there are many of them, this is something that is colliding with the identity of Venice. Is this itself the identity of Venice? They are the engine, they are the driving force of this extraordinary attraction that Venice is emitting towards the world. So if all the marbles and palazzo, the historical buildings, are the substance, are the matter itself of Venice, if this is created by several people, it is also important the narrative that we use to present Venice to the world. So all projects should not be excluded. And when we want to restart, we have to think about this pluralism. This diversity of ideas and opinions must be preserved, must be protected. I am the representative of an old institution, and in some contexts, we are just regarded as, old opinion owners. And this cultural activity in Venice has another role. It is the antidote to the giving up of the Venetian people, giving up their city, giving up to getting involved in historical changes that are actually changing the city. So Venice is not an island. You know that. It's many, many islands within a big lagoon. But if we put Venice in the context of the changes, of the historical changes of the world that we are living now, we can regard it as an island, perhaps. All these mutations, all these changes that we have lived and we are living at the moment, this is something that we are dealing with already. And these are political, cultural, social changes, and many, many others. And they all have something important. They all intertwined one another. So we don't just have single issues. We have several issues intertwining. So now we don't have any longer national issues. We have international issues. All issues are international. Some changes have already happened, and we do not have to underestimate them. We have some parameters that we should use to take a look at the world of work and jobs, employments, and we have this digital revolution that is something that will change our life and the relationship with nature and the environment as a driving force for our economic developments. In Venice, we have a triangle that is a real community, resident communities, the population, the repopulation, and the employment. So starting from these 3 points, we have several occasions, opportunities, like telework could be a way to give new force to this city. There are cities in the world that are really devoting some quarters of the city to telework with special internet connections and other things. And in Venice, there are so many vacant areas, so many unused spaces. So why don't we take this chance and make these districts into telework districts? And so we have to think about production forces that must be linked, connected with creativity. And so everything is intertwined. So, and this is also intertwined with natural heritage. Up to now, it was an ethic point of view, but the preservation of natural heritage is the driving force of the development of society. So we have to think that the natural heritage that we protect, that we are trying to protect as much as we can, it also helps our definition, our narrative towards the world, the outward narration. And so protection, safeguarding of the natural heritage of the Lagoon of Venice can be the driving force for restarting. And I think this is very clear. So the Lagoon is a great transportation system. So, but we have to reverse our thinking, because the world that is now is not the world that it used to be. So transportation, it's not the Lagoon that must adapt itself to new transportation means. It is the transportation means that have to adapt to the Lagoon. So this might sound trivial, but this is very important actually, because we will talk about big cruise ships later on, but rather than digging up the lagoon, that changed the morphology of the lagoon itself, why don't we use other transportation means that are adapted to the clearance of the current canal? And for the past 100 years, we were very pragmatic. We tried to use reality to adapt. But what I would like to sum up now is that Venice is very rich in terms of cultural institutions. And their strength is the quality, is the strength and eagerness, but they're also very fragmented. So they're too fragmented, and I really don't understand this fragmentation. Also because nowadays, in a world that is the one that I tried to describe earlier on, we should fight fragmentation. All Venetian institutions should join forces, still keeping their own identity and specificity, but still they should take a common direction that they all can keep in local, national, international meetings. So rather than, we need an coordination, an international, European form of coordination. And with this form of coordination, this would help the cultural institutions as well as the city itself. So I would like to conclude talking about restart. Restart means that we started at least once. In 1960, and his Venetian historian, he said in this Fondazione Cini, there was held an important conference about the future of Venice, 3-day conference, with several recommendations, about 6 recommendations, and none of these recommendations was even started. So from this viewpoint, Venice never started. So we do not need to restart. We first need to start. And I hope that this is the occasion, these 3 days are the occasion to start right now. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I think that among several hints that we are getting today, we do understand that Venice has to manage the heritage of industrial society, especially with Marghera. And hopefully we won't lose the possibility of getting on the wake on this wave of change that can become an unexpected opportunity to develop, also in terms of employment for the city. And now we'll have Tommaso Cacciari from No Grandi Navi, No Big Cruise Ships movement. So several appeals and several suggestions is what we are about to hear from him. Thank you, Tommaso. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the committees for what you have been doing for the past decades. And I too would like to talk about the importance of this event, the idea of coming all to one place to create a dialogue among several forces, political forces, social forces, and other forces. This is very important. I think this is the essence also of good politics, of good administrations. And so we have suffered from these in the past decades. We made at least thousands of interviews and meetings with journalists and scholars, and everybody was shocked by the fact that a big movement as ours never had the possibility to interact with the municipality or local administrations, but not even with the port authority that never talked with us. I don't know if the new chairman of the port authority is coming here, but I hope that he will actually have a dialogue with us, and what he said were not just words, because we would like to dialogue, to have a dialogue with him. I was asked not to make a protest, but to make proposals. Well, I was tempted. I was very tempted to criticize. We protested for about we protested throughout years when it was not possible to speak against the cruise ship companies. We protested for a very long time, and we had the very first big victory. You see, that picture will never again be ruined by huge cruise ships that will be passing by the Giudecca Canal. But our protest is not over. If they want to go on in the madness of wanting to bring cruise ships to Marghera, Marghera is not a viable solution. Also, De Blasi said this morning in an interview in the Gazzettino that if they want to bring cruise ships to Marghera, they will have to dig up all the Marghera canals, 24 kilometers of works. And also some Italian laws will be broken because the cruise ships would go very close to oil and gas facilities. And so, as a protest committee, we want first that the Italian law and regulations will be respected. Everybody has to abide to these. And we also, so it's important to respect regulations. And so we have several regulations that must be respected when they do new plannings. And then it is important to keep protecting not just the Giudecca Canal, but the whole lagoon. If you open any textbook about Venice history, Venice cannot be detached by its lagoon. When they wanted to dig the Canale Sant'Orta canal a few years ago, we protested because Venice cannot be detached by the lagoon. So the lagoon and the Stone City and the Water City are all entities that cannot be detached, that cannot be separated. So water, stone, flesh, this is something that they all one single entity. Well, we should need a conference just to speak about this. So the safeguarding, the protection that was enlarged to the Canal of St. Mark's and Giudecca, we should enlarge it, broaden that protection to the whole lagoon. And also, again, when we talk about big cruise ships, we have to refuse ambiguity. Either you refuse these big cruise ships or you don't. So either you realize that this is a frail city, or you just you just give it up and leave these Costa Crociere and other big cruise ship companies to come over and leave the city to its ecosystem, and that's not possible. So it's the size of 20,000 tons is not a possibility. It's not viable for a city like Venice. And again, if still you want to have big cruise ships coming over in this area, the lagoon is not a solution. So big cruise ships must not cross the Venetian lagoon, nor the Venetian, nor the Venice area, not even Marghera's area of the lagoon. So we must be more serious. 90 days for a call. In 90 days, you cannot create a yoga show. So if you want to accept big cruise ships, they have to stay out of the lagoon. This is the only viable option, and we need a political decision and accept projects that are already ongoing. So again, there's no need to go back in time. We already have some viable solutions, and they are not taking into consideration big cruise ships in Venice, in the Venice Lagoon. And also we have the climate change issue, because, you know, Venice is a global city, many people coming over to take pictures of the big palazzos. Venice is great because of its waters. So the big cruise ships are not compatible, perhaps, with the Atlantic oceans, because the CO2 emissions of these big cruise ships is not something that is taken into consideration at the moment, and we don't even know why. So I would like to end here my presentation. And I would like to state again that we are very proud that we were able to win this first battle, but we will start back to mobilize everyone, and we will be monitoring so that no other devastation will be brought upon our lagoon. Thank you.
Well, to this respect, UNESCO is developing projects, the so-called buffer zones, i.e. areas to protect certain goods. For instance, the one in Villa Adriana in Tivoli, where some time ago a landfill had been planned. We know that Rome, the city as such, is a landfill, but they actually wanted to have a proper landfill close to this beautiful villa. So we also need a buffer zone for Venice, that's obvious, and this buffer zone has to include the whole, to protect the whole lagoon. Well, let's now give the floor to Matteo Sacchi of Venezia.com. This is a social network that was founded by Stefano Soffiato in 2000 and focuses on many different aspects. Good morning, everybody. My name is Saki, not Saki. No problem. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers and the private committees and Europa Nostra for inviting me here. We appreciate this invitation, and as you asked, we will try to make proposals rather than complaining. So in 2009, Venezia.com wrote a decalogue, a program which was reviewed in 2020, including all our suggestions and projects to make our city a better place that can be appreciated by residents and visitors. So I've jotted down a few important points that I will try to read. Actually, in point 7 of our decalogue, a periodical meeting among Venetian associations is recommended, interfacing with the public administration, which is what we're actually doing here today, more or less. So we gave our document to all political forces at the government and at the opposition. And today we're going to talk about special statute. We have chosen this topic because, seeing the associations that are present here today, we have realized that the other associations would have tackled other important topics, but not this one. That's why we have selected the topic, special statute for our city, which is number 1 in our decalogue. When our city obtains a special statute, this will have some positive effects on the many problems of our city. So to make decisive decisions for the rebirth of Venice, for a more harmonious and diversified development of its economy, for the residential function, for the preservation of the huge architectural, artistic, and environmental heritage, we need extraordinary resources that are much more significant than the ones we have obtained so far. And we need autonomy in managing them. So we're not talking about a special law. We're talking about a special statute that will allow Venice to take care of itself. For this purpose, I would like to make a quotation. Venice has to think big. So Venice needs not only a special law, but a special statute, recognizing its beauty, its peculiarity, and its unicity. So these are the words of Patriarch Francesco Moraglia some time ago, approximately 1 year ago. Venice is obviously a special and specific city, different from all the other cities in the world. And we believe that this is undisputable and unquestionable. Notwithstanding the huge quantities of capitals moved in Venice, especially thanks to tourism, all other forms of economic activities have disappeared. Only the ones promoting tourism have remained, leading to increased prices in housing and to the closing down of many services to the citizens, worsening their quality of life. The capitals deriving from tourism do not have a positive consequence for our city because they are moved somewhere else. So notwithstanding the big economic spin-off, Venice, enslaved by tourist economy, can be viewed as an area with a depressed economy. The worrisome and unstoppable loss of inhabitants and non-touristic economic activities bear witness to all this. For this reason, Venice and its lagoon meet all requirements to demand a special statute to protect the environmental context and the economic and social context that has been impoverished by intensive touristic exploitation. A new special statute area the Venetian Lagoon. This is possible because it is well known that the European Community promotes the creation of areas with a special statute. Therefore, we hope that very soon the peculiarity and the physical and economic fragility of Venice and its lagoon will be soon institutionally recognized, giving more power to the local administration. With an autonomy in terms of spending, with fiscal benefits on the area, and with the possibility of detaxing those production activities that are an alternative to tourism. This would relaunch the economy of our city and would allow residents to go on living in our city, providing funds for restoration, rebuilding, and reclamation. This request of ours does not go to the local, regional, and national administration, bodies that do not seem to see this important and fundamental opportunity. But we ask directly the European Community, please help us preserve a cultural and naturalistic heritage that is envied by the whole world. Thank you. Thank you very much, Matteo Secchi. To be honest, there really is a real estate and speculation issue which is significant in Brescia. Now the floor to Vittorio D'Amosto, one of the young people of the third millennium, an association that back in 2018 and 2019 received the prize Venice of the Year. Good morning, everybody. Well, I have decided to express my thanks in English, since my mom has always spoken in English with me.
The Comitati Privati Internazionali, to thank Europa Nostra, to thank Carla Toffolo and also Paola for having us here and for giving voice to the young people as well. I really appreciated by Carla that she didn't only want one person, but she managed to fit in two young people representing, on one side, both will represent Venice Calls, on the other side, we both represent a big part of the Venetian community, of the world community, that is young people that want to do something for their future. So after this, I wanted to thank all of the speakers that were before me, as I believe they gave a really good dynamic view on the various perspectives of Venice by the different protagonists that live the city. And also, I'm so happy that this is an opportunity that can bring all generations together. So this gives the chance of generational exchange. So older people, more experienced people can give heads up, can give tips, can give even counseling to younger people. But at the same time, younger people may have ideas, may have different experiences that by sharing with different generations, you're able to find better solutions. So this being said, I also would like to propose to whoever's listening to start taking labels off. Because I remember during the first COVID times, so many things were being said about young people going out partying and not having any consideration about the pandemic that we're living through. But I can assure you, Venice Calls is one example of young people that during the pandemic, they would work hard and even try and find through supermarkets, through La Sospesa, ways to bring food to people that were suffering the most. And these were young people that were doing it together with even other generations that were doing this already. Another label that I would like for people to take off is the label that not everyone that speaks English or another language within the city is a tourist. This is something that I live on my skin. My mother might live on her skin sometimes, but I sometimes, whilst we're walking around Venice, and our natural way of speaking is to speak English to each other, I sometimes see Venetians or local people that will look at us kind of like in not the most pleasant way. And I would just like to share with the Venetian community and the international community that I believe Venice is a very international city. And not only because it is visited by tourism, but because it has a lot of citizens, residents that come from an international background. So I would like to move to the image where Venice can really embrace an international world that can live together and collaborate to find better solutions. This being said, I would like to move on to a small text that I wrote for today's listeners. And this was written in Italian. So this is where I move to Italian.
I'm asking for a future to include new residents rather than sending away the present ones. A future with job opportunities that are sustainable for our environment. A present where the Venetian community realizes that our city is being exploited. I would like to ask the international community that is listening to me now to be aware of what is happening in Venice, and I'm asking for help. In the name of all those young people who want to live here, want to have their future here, who want to channel their energies supporting our city. Up with Venice. I am a young citizen, a resident in Venice, and I ask for an international exchange with the other European cities who have similar problems. Through this exchange, we should be able to implement similar solutions to promote an innovative and sustainable lifestyle. Venice is not dying. It is back to life, thanks to the people who are still here today and do not want to relinquish the city. I mean, we symbolize and epitomize resilience. And resilience is possible only if you include all social levels, all workers and all those who live in the city. We must be able to represent and reflect the needs of those who want to live in Venice, not visit it. Regarding tourism, there are many pros and cons. However, we can all be sure of the fact that our city cannot be dependent on tourism. Our city must have its own life, must innovate, create, inspire. The city of Venice is the city of the world, not only an Italian city. Venice truly is the city that can host the brightest minds in every industry and be the example of a livable city in harmony with the environment, promoting a healthy lifestyle for human beings, both in physical and psychological terms. So I would like to bring to your attention the fact that I'm not talking of a utopia or a dream, but of a reality which is, for us, consisting of a bridge and a lane, a ponte and a calle in Venetian. So let's not forget our past, not because of its glory, but because of the respect of a city, an island that has always lived in the appropriate balance with nature and with human beings. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, Vittorio, who is inviting us to plan a sustainable lifestyle, focusing also on solidarity, which is what you already do, both in practical terms, shopping in the supermarket, and in cultural terms, involving translation and so on and so forth. So solidarity must be a fundamental element in the development of our future city. And I would like now to invite Remy Vercogne of OCIO, the Civic Observatory on Housing and Residency, focusing on real estate issues, which is a fundamental issue for the development. Thank you. I would like to thank the organizers for this very important initiative that we all appreciate. And we all agree on the fact that Venice is confronted with significant risks, environmental and social risks predominantly. I do not know whether this morning we will be able to find an agreement on proposals and solutions because we do not have much time. However, it is well known that our observatory was set up to focus on housing, which is an important component of the social issues of our city. It is well known that the old city is progressively losing its inhabitants, and it is clear that it is dejuvenating. Our observatory was set up a few years ago in 2019 to focus on the three main dynamics of dejuvenation. And I would like to start from the most recent one, the most visible one, that refers to the progressive conversion of a high number of flats from residential use to touristic use. In 2019, we had an equal number of residents and beds for tourists. This was due predominantly to the development of tourist rentals, even though hotels are still being built on the islands. But predominantly it's private tourist rentals that have taken place. And there are two significant dynamics that are rooted in time and that have also had repercussions on short tourist rentals. Because they have promoted this and they have dismantled the instruments that could have somewhat stemmed this. This is the failure of social housing projects that very often only have the name of social housing. These have been announced in the last 20 years and have been ineffective. And then the disinvestment in public residential buildings. This is a national problem. So tourist rentals and the failure of social housing projects. And then on top of this, we also have disinvestment in public housing. This is typical of Venice, but of many other cities as well. So we have analyzed the issue, and we propose 4 main recommendations. The first one is for tourist rentals that need to be more tightly regulated at different levels, national, regional, and local level. So without going into greater depth, I would like to add that it would be possible to envisage permits for tourist rentals at municipal level or limitations to the number of nights per year. And it is possible also to envisage the sharing of data between the tourist platforms and the local authorities. Then it could also be possible to limit the change in the allowed use for the different properties. And also, incentives could be given to transform tourist buildings into residence buildings. So the first issue refers to tourist rentals where a more tight regulation is mandatory. And we can see this in many European cities. So that is why it has a significance to turn towards a community. Then participatory social housing projects that should prove effective, including instruments to prevent the subsequent release in the market of the housing project. So real, serious social housing projects, and then public housing, which should not be neglected. and is an essential element of the right to housing. So it's important to support public housing investments, bringing them at least at the level of the European investment. And mitigation is paramount to make sure that former public housing is used for touristic purposes. So managing the residential houses in a transparent way is another desirable activities. It is necessary to review the criteria to determine the cost of renting in the context of territorial pacts, eliminating the zoning of the old city and reducing the upper limit of the value per square meter. And there is also room to further promote this instrument, which is to be seen as complementary with social housing and public housing. So the number of inhabitants has been reduced significantly, and there are many significant environmental hazards. And to conclude my presentation on behalf of OSHA, I would like to say the following. We want our voice to be heard internationally. We have seen how difficult it is to be a united front in Venice. The international level is very important, but we have to get together and exchange our ideas locally. Thank you.
Grazie a
Thank you, Remy. And now, Italia Nostra, with the architect Rossana Bettinelli. She will read speech by the President Lydia Werswash. So I'd like her to please read the speech.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everyone. I am president of the Brescia section of Italia Nostra, and on behalf of the new president of the Venezia section, Emanuela Bassano, and also Livia Fersfug, who prepared this speech that I am about to read, I would like to express my own opinion about what I've heard up to now, and I'm very satisfied. Because it is true that the coordination is lacking, but up to now I've heard a beautiful choir, and there was no wrong notes. And so I will also bring this to the attention of the Venice section, and this is also thanks to the international committees that are working for this coordination. So Livia Fersfog said, we were asked to present concrete proposals to restart, but restart from where? The epidemics didn't change the paradigms of Venice. So we are going back to a worse situation without tourism, with services to the citizens that are cut off, and so a lagoon that is more and more in peril. And we are sorry that UNESCO did not recognize Venice as a site in peril, because this could have been a hint, a way to take action more quickly. So the real project for Venice is to turn the lagoon into lagoon and the city into a city. So I will focus on a lagoon. In 2016, Europa Nostra said that Venice is the lagoon of Venice is the site in the biggest site in peril of Europe. So this is because the lagoon is not just a basin made out of water, but it is a system that is working, and it's made of complex complex network of water and land. And so all its elements need the same care that we would give churches and other buildings. So this is also important for all the people that come to the lagoon and leave the lagoon. So we have to say that now in the canal Malamocco-Marghera and all the traffic there is an issue, and many institutes like SNR and other universities have already shown the damage given to the St. Mark's Canal because of the cruise ships. And now, with a new regulation, we are moving the traffic from the Saint Mark's Canal to the Petroli Canal, which is the Marghera Canal, and that's not legal. And so there are 157 million that will be used for the new pontoon in Marghera, but that will take at least 10 years. So we must find other ways, like also Mr. Musolino said, to also use to allow the crossing of cruise ships of smaller tonnage and with no emissions. So, and using the current port. And we do not have enough time to talk about other possible solutions and to remove Moto Ondoso, the Moto Ondoso, so to reduce the wave movement that is eroding Venice. We should use GPS to know what boat is going at what speed. And also MOSE, the project MOSE, we should think about other solutions like the raising of the pavement level in certain areas to reduce the risks of average sea level high waters. And we think that we can remove this paradigm of mass tourism by supporting tax benefits. And also it is important to support research activities and other activities so that more inhabitants will come back to Venice. And so it's also important to start a conversion of the current tourist apartments and convert them into residential apartments. So there are some resolutions about new hotels. And that is also some to take into consideration because over the last decade, many new hotels were established. And also it is important to remember that Venice is not just a quarter, it's not just a district. It is important to think of Venice also in terms of public transportation as much as you do with the mainland area of Venice. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Rossana. You have brought back some other ideas like smaller tonnage, Marghera, residential issues. It means that we have this direction that we are sharing. At this point, we have Anna Sommers-Cox that who is the director of Art newspaper. She used to be editor-in-chief of Apollo and also member of Istituto Veneto. As you know, she is been fighting many battles, and she's very active in Venice and very committed to Venice. And she has curated many international exhibitions in the past. So let me see if we have this connection. Yes, yes, I think so. So
Speech. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm on a terrace in Rome, and I am very glad to have been asked to talk at this important meeting. Don't let us kid ourselves that we are loved or even appreciated by the local authorities. That applies not only to the activist societies like the No Grandi Navi, who might predictably be resented by the authorities because of the interests that they cross, but also the private committees. You might be surprised to know that Paolo Costa, who used to be all smiles, when he became head of the Venice Port Authority, threatened to sue me and Venice in Peril because on the basis of Cambridge University's studies of the Lagoon, we had pointed out to the world press that deep dredging the Canale dei Petroli for the huge port development that he was planning would be damaging to Venice. And one of the leading people of one of the most generous private committees was told by Mayor Brugnaro the other day that he could put the 3 million euros a year that that committee gives to Venice down the toilet. So let us consider for the moment how best we can use our power of leverage and public relations. Now, I'm a journalist, and I would like to say something that may shock you. Venice is becoming an unfashionable topic with the international press because there has been a moan of pain rising from Venice for so long, and the rumor that Venice was dying, that they have become bored with it. It's like the image of the starving child in Africa. Unfortunately, people don't react to it anymore. So how we communicate is very important. And to this kind of fatigue, Venice fatigue, has to be added a new factor, which I have been shocked to discover, which is that Venice is considered a matter for the European elite or the Western elite, and that what really matters in a time of climate change are the people of the Sahel or the people of Bangladesh, and who really cares about Venice. I have heard this said by two really quite important people, and we should bear this in mind as COP26 draws closer, starting on the 31st of October. We must be aware that we are seen as marginal to the great world problem, just that. Another thing about communication is that in order not to feed the Venice fatigue, communication about our problems must be exceedingly precise. It must say, this is a very specific problem. And for example, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's most recent report has made predictions for what sea level rise will mean according to various temperature scenarios. And it is quite clear that their intermediate projection, which is of a temperature rise of 2.1 degrees to 3.5 degrees, and therefore a sea level rise of 44 to 76 centimeters, means without a single doubt the death of Venice by the end of this century if there is no plan. So I would say that we need to focus on the very big issues, but with very precise scientific data. And that gets me on to yet another problem, which is that the scientists have been saying this actually for a long time, but the scientists communicate, Italian scientists included, mostly in English. They communicate in their own language, scientific language, which most people don't understand. And above all, the publications in which they present their findings do not reach politicians. And therefore, one of our roles can be to act as, shall we say, interpreters or popularizers of this science to make it quite clear to not only politicians, but also the world at large, what the reality of the situation is. We have to, for example, counter the myth that Morse is the final solution. Morse is only there for the storm surges. It will not deal with sea level rise. It cannot cope with sea level rise. Therefore, we are living in a new and very dangerous time. However, I have reason for hope. I mean, we should have reason for hope. Mario Draghi actually mentioned Venice at the UMED conference the other day. He said it's one of my concerns. I have not heard a single Presidente del Consiglio, Italian Premier, mention Venice ever. Mario Draghi seems to be interested in it. Secondly, everybody knows about climate change, and therefore, if we phrase it correctly, we can harness the concern about climate change and the European plans to deal with climate change for the benefit of Venice. And it's a mutual benefit because everybody can imagine Venice actually rotting and falling down, because that is what's going to happen unless a plan is devised. And there is no plan. That is the last problem about Venice. There is absolutely no overarching plan. Most of the problems of Venice derive from the fact that each of the many separate authorities responsible for the city is going its own way for its own benefit, instead of there being an overarching plan which says, what do we want for Venice? Do we want it to survive? And if we want it to survive, how do we want it to survive? So there needs to be a structural change in the whole way in which Venice is administered. And the only way to achieve that is by direct contact with Rome, direct contact with European authorities, and direct contact with the highest level of specialists. For example, the Delta Plan in the Netherlands, because as you can imagine, the Netherlands knows a great deal about defense against waters. So we must not despair. The situation is desperate, but it is not hopeless. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna. It was important.
Thank you, Anna, for your speech about communication and new kinds of communication. And I believe that as concerning the Italian press, the Italian media, I wouldn't have those high expectations. And by saying so, I will also introduce the new session of our program, of our agenda. So it's with the academic world. So I wouldn't have those high expectations from these worlds, such as the journalism and university, because they are taking two separate directions, and by doing so, they are giving a bad service to the country and to the civil development. So the world of communication has more and more taken simplistic schemes, and also, and also all the issues of fake news. And at the same time, the university world has just focused on very short-sighted initiatives. And when I hear the word scholar, intellectual, this is something that I do not see anymore, because the current professors are so very specialized in extremely specific topics that they just fake knowledge of other issues and themes and topics because they do not know about anything else out of their own specific field. And also journalists, and I do not know now also in terms of journalism, there is no more proper training, so we will see the direction that we will be taking. So now I would like to have the Pro-Chancellor of Venice University Ca' Foscari, Caterina Carpinato. Thank you very much. Well, after this attack to university and the mentality of university, well, I will remove my mask. I have to present myself for what I am. Since last November, I was called by our Chancellor, Tiziana Riffiello, that today could not be here with us. So I would like to welcome this beautiful initiative. I will be the Pro-Chancellor of the third mission. So I would like to say that what the person before me just said, that danger, if you help me, we could actually fight that danger. So next slide, please. And the one after. So there is a small temple. Yes, that's slide number 3. I showed what this third mission is, because third mission is not very easy to understand. So third mission, exclamation point, exclamation mark, question mark. So I am a classic studies expert. So I used to study Greek classic studies. So our university is a civil university, plural university, and we need skills, base skills, motivations, university life, and then we have 3 pillars that are holding the future. So we have research, and we have then didactics, so teaching methodologies, and third is the third mission, which is the social impact. But the first 2 pillars are easy to understand. We know what research and didactics are. We have experienced those. For the third mission, we have to ask ourselves many things. So first and foremost, we have to think, we need to use the verb share. Then what, when, how, why, with whom, to whom, and where are we supposed to share this third impact? So university makes available the energy of the territory, of the area. And so we have within the university research and didactics, but at the same time we have interconnections. So the academic world talks about its own opportunities and shows those opportunities to the world around. So this also means a change of pace. Institutional responsibility to share academic knowledge in an accessible and usable way in synergy with the territory and society. Through third mission, Ca' Foscari promotes and enhances academic research and teaching, because these are our products. This is what we are taking care of. And we engage in the production of public goods, the development of open education, technology transfer. Thanks to its history, its tradition, and its position within the city, and we are talking about also our historical building that is in the center of the city. Ca' Foscari University has, since its foundation, played an active role in the public, cultural, and international life of Venice through a variety of interdisciplinary initiatives. By vocation, this was our slogan when we were established in 1868, and our slogan is being open to the world. So Venice is a city that makes us think about time and space in a different way. So everyone who lives in Venice knows that the measurement of time and space is different. As said before, we have bridges and alleys to speak about space. So this really is a city that can become a workshop. It is a place where we have a university rector, university chancellor, and she's a woman. And women know that time have a different perception of the time that we can have here in Venice. So we do know the needs of the present times to create bridges for the future. For the first time, the National Agency for the Evaluation of the University System and Research asked to do an evaluation of the university quality with 4 case studies for an evaluation of the context of the third mission in the period 2015 to 2019. I would like to say that one of the case studies that we chose, that is called Venice and its Lagoon, is a project by our archaeologist colleagues to talk about the importance of knowing Venice from the early stages of the city and to know the archaeological history of this city and to protect this extraordinary historical, cultural, artistic heritage that Venice is. So we started from the very early stage of Venice, and we sent a message in such a way. So it was a very complex exercise of group awareness, because it was a moment of collective self-awareness useful for analyzing the economic, social, and cultural dimension of the impact of our research and teaching activities offered in synergy with the outside world. And now I would like to talk about what we're talking within the academic senate of Ca' Foscari. After the new mandate of the new chancellor, now we have the new strategic plan 2020-2026. And so this is part of the plan that was advised by our rector, by our chancellor. And we had several groups that acted as catalysts, and we are about to publish this program. And we have 7 main proposals. The first one is Ca' Foscari for Venice, a great laboratory open to the challenges of the future. Ca' Foscari, the city's cultural forge melting pot in the field of historical, artistic, and humanistic knowledge. Scientific Ca' Foscari as scientific reference point for sustainability. We have several also Venice World Capital of Sustainability, Venezia, Bauhaus Project of the Sea, and then Ca' Foscari as basic skills needed for the challenges of the future, Ca' Foscari as a city for the Ca' Foscari graduates, and the Ca' Foscari graduates for the city, new organizational models and the digital challenge, and inclusion, social justice, and gender equality. Then if you could please show number 8, slide number 8. So the first target is to consolidate the relationship with the institutions, the local institutions, so that the students can become the first citizens and can benefit from the cultural heritage. And the second point is to enhance the collaboration with international partners, also with the idea of promoting territory and the students and the activities of the university. And then the third point, the third target, is to create value for the local area, promoting an ecosystem that becomes an accelerator of projects and activities that will involve cultural institutions, economic organizations. And the fourth point is to create incentives for in order to involve civil society and the citizens. And also, we would like to boost our the sports system of university, the sports facilities of university, and we would also like to share our sports facilities to the city and to all of you. And we need you, we need your support, we need your suggestions. So thank you very much for your kind attention.
Grazie, quindi un grande impegno nella...
Thank you very much. So, the third mission and Ca' Foscari University commitment. Well, I believe that as long as each individual is committed into the third mission, if this commitment is not evaluated in terms of the university career, that temple will always be missing a column. Anyhow, let me leave the floor to Alberto Ferlenga, the rector of the university IUAV, professor in architectural composition. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you to the committees, to Europa Nostra, to Paola, to all of you. Well, it is relatively easy to take part in this debate since most of the essential things have already been said. And we agree on all what has been said and have been active for years. Universities are containers of many different things. They reflect the world, and the youngest energies in universities often fight a battle also on the social grounds and not only on cultural ones. Universities, of course, have many defects, but that's not the place to talk about them. I'm not going to talk about my own university because it is well known what our university has done, what it is doing, and its features. But I would like to focus on an important cultural change universities have experienced in recent times. It is true, universities tend to be self-referential, self-centered, but this has also produced excellence and excellent people who were active on the international scenario in their own specific field of research. It is true, however, that universities have somewhat become detached from the rest of the world. But in the last few years, things have changed. Universities have changed. I mean, I did not find myself in the portrait that you have painted of universities, because in the last few years, many things and many components have changed with a significant renewal. So maybe what you described is still an old idea of universities. In this city, universities have been working together on some fundamental issues. These are the ones that, focusing on art, architecture, and conservation, we had to do with. And of course, if a university focuses on these issues, if the university is in Venice, well, unavoidably, this leads to special attention towards Venice. But significant relationships have also been developed, which in the past were somewhat neglected. For instance, universities have gained the trust of committees, agencies, institutions, manufacturing companies, and they have produced initiatives together, some of which are also very significant. In the last few years, there has been an initiative to promote a fundamental issue, jobs. And this has led to several spin-off initiatives were start-up companies promoted and supported also by our municipality and by our region. So we have tried to demonstrate that bringing an essential component back into this city, students, they had actually been cast out of the city. But with students, we were able to experiment new things. Maybe you have heard of our experiment during the pandemic. We've made an agreement with homeowners that has brought more than 1,000 students back to Venice, and more than 300 flats have been taken away from tourist rentals. Of course, when tourist resumes, the situation might change again, but this proved that 1,000 students back into the city can actually change the social life of our city. We also agree and share some proposals. I have heard of a special statute, and I remember an old article by Paolo Baratta stating that Venice was the city of institutions with the special statute. It is true. A special city requires special institutes, different types of monitoring and controlling agents. This was done by Biennale, and our university has also obtained the statute of special school, because in this way we can best express the difference related to being in this city. We have worked at the Santa Marta project. That area has changed significantly in the past few years. All buildings have a new use now. Students and committees have worked together, trying to reuse spaces, make proposals, and so on and so forth. So I believe that this issue, the fact that universities used to be detached from the rest of the world and self-referential, well, this is no longer university. The university has contributed to opening to public use palaces and precious buildings, the maintenance of which is not an easy task for universities, since they still get too few funds. And all these buildings would have fallen in private hands. They would have been turned into hotels. But we actually kept them open for the population, for associations, Tolentini, Catron, Ca' Foscari. We historically, because of our tradition, have been focusing more on the historical part of Venice. Of course, this is my own view, but it is based on real initiatives and real results. There are two important issues I would like to address, which I believe can also be the source of possible strategies, and they represent a need for sure. So first, I would like to share with you a feeling. I focus on architecture, on cities, and during the pandemic, considering the economic tragedy it has brought on us, and on Venice as well, Venice has taken on a different look. Venice has been seen as a potentially sustainable city, according to many parameters which I could list, ranging from the relationship with the landscape, the safety, the size, the use of the city, the relationship with the water, the fact that it is still a productive city. It is not a city in the desert. It is part of a big area. So if you list all the parameters, these are exactly what the big cities in the world that are lacking proposal and growth right now, and that have seen that any previous planning instrument was ineffective. Well, all these big cities are actually to meet all these requirements one by one. These are the parameters of sustainability of cities. Relationship with the landscape, the size of the city, the fact of being a small city in a wider urban context, and so on and so forth. So when our city, for a certain period in time, had very few tourists or no tourists at all, no big cruise ships, then people actually understood that. This idea disseminated, and it poses the following theme. This city still is a model. I mean, of course, Venice has many, many problems. Residents are moving out of Venice, but we still have public space that are very peculiar and very suitable to host different types of jobs, employment, and housing. But of course, this cannot but be the result of initiatives. Startups and spin-offs must find their own place in this context. If the MOSE system guarantees a certain level of certainty and safety to the city, then most likely ground floor spaces will be reused, and they're perfect to host different forms of employment. And we're working on this. We're working on culture, cultural management, climate change. And I would like to conclude with the following comment made by a famous architectural historian, Bruno Zevi, who taught in our university. And this is what he said after the reconstruction. That was 1946 in the magazine Meter. Well, he said, we have to rebuild. And maybe we're going through a phase in which the deep changing of main parameters in terms of sustainability requires a cultural and physical reconstruction, which is very similar to 1946. We need a new culture, but we need to rebuild. We need to redesign our space. So, going on with my quotation, to transform, you need to know. And the war, the catastrophe of the Second World War, had given the possibility to do something and to get to know what Italy had actually become, what those cities had become, which for a long time had been viewed with a mentality that pertained to a different time. I mean, the physical evolution of a city is fundamental, and this is part of the value of Venice. It is not just a static framework, it is the value of city. And this is work in progress. Today's Venice is not the Venice we used to know 50 years ago, but the physical and material composition of Venice, the context, the changes in the spaces and relationships, well, the last analysis done dates back to 50 years ago. Since then, knowledge has not advanced, and we're talking about a city that has changed completely. I mean, think about the transformation of buildings that have been transformed in bed and breakfast facilities. I mean, and this is irreversible. You cannot easily go back. You know, they kick up the facade and they change everything else inside. So we have an opportunity. I mean, there are many opportunities. We've heard many of them. But we have the opportunity of increasing the knowledge of this city, which can still be a model. We're going through the crisis of urban centers, and this is worldwide. We're talking about cities that have 40 million inhabitants. We're talking about models that have not been understood. Well, this city still offers a model. And we can think about space, housing, residence, way of life, employment. I mean, we should work on this. This is where we need more knowledge, also direct knowledge. I mean, tourists often do not realize what they're experiencing when they come to Venice. And I would like to conclude by saying that universities can play a fundamental role, but they have to work together with the inhabitants and with the institutions, so that we can have a real snapshot of what the city is today. And we can do that today. It doesn't need to be done manually. We got drones, we have lasers that will allow us to understand very quickly how this extraordinary body of art and buildings has transformed up to present time. If we don't understand this, we can't view this as the scenario, the stage of something that we would like to develop, because perhaps those areas and those places do not have the features that would allow us to do that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ferlinga. I would like now to leave the floor to Corilla, a consortium of several universities that coordinates research on Venice and its lagoon. Pierpaolo Campostrini, the director of the consortium, is taking the floor. Thank you very much. I would like to show you some slides. Corilla is a consortium for managing research activities in the Venice Lagoon, supervised by the Ministry of Scientific Research, a ministry that is part of the Ministers' Committee to Safeguard Venice. So the decision was made to set up a local agency to coordinate the efforts made by the University of Venice and Padua and by the national research centers that have been present in our city for a long time and have played a fundamental role. So it is our task to transfer to decision makers the knowledge necessary to make decisions. Scientists do not have the task of making decisions. They have the task to provide useful and usable knowledge so that politicians can make decisions based on that. It may seem provocatory to show you this picture, but it is fundamental. This is a game changer, and the game changed last year. On the 3rd of October 2020, Venice has changed. It is no longer endangered by high water, and this is not little. We have resolved a huge problem that for 50 years has blocked a whole generation. So this is what happened on the 3rd of October. You can see the graphs showing that the tide, dotted line, and the tide actually occurred in the sea, and what we could measure at the La Salute Church. So the tide did not exceed 80 centimeters, whereas the sea reached 125 centimeters. This is thanks to 1.5 kilometers of barriers rising from the bottom of the sea to protect the city. Since 1872 up to present time, we have had 323 peaks above 110 centimeters, while until 1959, all these events amounted to 43. I was born in 1960, and I have experienced 280 floods. I mean, I believe that this is a world record, 280 floods. My son was born in 1990, and he has experienced 160 floods because the frequency has increased significantly in the last 20 years, 148 floods. So a number that is rising significantly. My grandchild was born 30 years later, last November, and he has witnessed only one flood on the 8th of December, where because of a mistake in the procedure, the Mose barrier did not rise and the city was flooded. So without the Mose being activated, we had 130 centimeters of water also in the city. Well, I believe that my grandchild will no longer see high waters in Venice in his life, because Venice now has a tool, and there will be no more floods. So we took on a big challenge. It is not the only one. There are many other challenges. This picture is exemplary of the challenge we have to take on in the coming years. It is a beautiful photograph of part of the lagoon showing the different physical texture of the area. You can see that we have different vegetal barriers. I mean, the wealth of this very particular habitat allows flora and fauna to develop. Here we have migratory birds coming from the north of Europe to stop, take a rest, and then move towards Africa. And this challenge, unfortunately, cannot be managed with bans alone. I mean, today we do not have any regulatory tools that allow us to safeguard the lagoons from the sea rising. And, you know, the natural forces, I mean, you know that we started 1,500 years ago by building a city on a lagoon. I mean, today we would never do that because an environmental strategic assessment would immediately forbid it. But we've done this. And to manage this, we need a plan, the plan of the morphology of the lagoon, and the new catchphrase is ecosystem restoration. So we do not only have to restore buildings, we have to restore the whole ecosystem. And the ecosystem envisages the presence of mankind as well. So it is not just nature. There's no landscape without the presence of human beings, and there's no ecosystem without human beings. So even if we banned every possible ship, including ferry boats from the lagoon, this will not be rescued. We need to do something different. Well, this picture has gone around the world after 2019. But I mean, this column, which is right at the entrance of San Marco, was not enjoying perfect health before. You know, what I meant to say is that this accelerated aging and degradation has been going on for some time now. And in my opinion, in the last few years, we have dramatically under-evaluated the consequences of salty water on buildings. This shows the structure of Venetian buildings. Bricks below and marmor on top of the bricks. An important scientific meeting has taken place on the bricks in Venice. It was 1979. I had just started university. There were no other meetings of this kind focusing on the bricks in Venice buildings because scientific research has not progressed. Funds were lacking. There was not a lot of interest about this, so the problem was under-evaluated. But research has now restarted again. You've seen the symbol of the program of research launched by Gorilla called Venice 2021. So there are technologies today, there are innovative technologies that allow us to take the salt away from these buildings. So conservation, but mainly regeneration, restoration, because we have to understand that we've reached the peak in the history of Venice. I mean, we used to be flooded. We're no longer going to be flooded. Mr. Felenga was right when he talked about the new use of our city. So we need also to find a new use, a sustainable use of our lagoon, a very complex environment. And all these decisions must not be based on vague ideas, but on scientific knowledge. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you. Thank you to Gorilla Director. I believe that we will need more scientific research about the lagoon. I'm not a scholar myself, but I have participated to several conferences, and there is not yet an unanimous voice in terms of what happens, whether the mosaic is always on or off. So there were some worries. I wouldn't want these scientists to become like the virologists nowadays. You know, now this is the last part of this morning session, and we will be talking about economic fabric. a proposal for an economic renaissance. So first we will have Gianni De Checchi that will talk to us about the artisans, especially the problems of craftsmen linked to the issue of mass tourism. I lost of sight Mr. De Checchi. Well, then I will leave the floor to Claudio Scarpa, that is the director of AVA. I would kindly ask Mr. Scarpa to talk first, and he's also a member of the board of Confcommercio. So please. Thank you. I would like to thank you for this invitation. I will have two thanks. The first one and the last one. The first one, it is because you were kind enough to invite us, and I also am here on behalf of the President Zanon of Confcommercio, and we are very happy that we have the chance to speak our voice, our minds here. So also on behalf of the President of Confcommercio, Mr. Zanon, I would like to thank you all. And during the last lockdown, a dear friend, Mr. Benzoni, he will publish a book about the Toletta, and which is a beautiful cultural center of our city. He asked me to talk about these theme, this topic, and so I wouldn't want to bore you with the whole speech that I have written for him, and so that you can also read the whole speech and on the book. But this city has so many issues, and they are so very difficult to resolve that we should just focus on certain important themes and topics. And sometimes the topics are not the same that we see on newspapers' first pages. So the first one, the first issue is that this city is too old. This is a city that breathing so the aging in Venice, the aging society is extremely high. This is the second oldest city in Italy after Genoa, because here, so we have the oldest population in Italy, in Venice. And so for each young person between 0 and 14 years old, so we have 3 people that are over 65. So we have an aging population, and so first thing to do, in my opinion, is to bring back the young people, new families, children to this city. And earlier on, we have heard the words of the pro-rector and Director Ferlinga that talked about the roles of the cities. But it is important to just keep our students here in Venice. So it's important to create new jobs and new employments here in the city, because it is important not just to create wealth, but it is important to create a different city in order to attract these young people. So we need private, we need also to, we need private individuals to come back to the apartments that now are used only for touristic rental. And then also we need to think about a different system of transportation means, because for people who work in Venice, the current situation of transportation means is not ideal. And so we also have to think about possibilities for these cities that are jobs that are not only related to tourism. I've worked for about 10 years in North Mestre, and so I think that it is possible not just, to work not only in Venice, not only in Mestre, but we can work all around the municipality of Venice. So in our nation, the freedom of having an enterprise, of the freedom of starting up a new business is important. So I am the director of the Venetian Association of Hotels, and In the past years, there was not even one regulation about the tourism flow, about the tourism management. So the only strategic regulations were made up by the current administration. Also, this block about establishing new hotels. And this block of establishing new hotels in the Lagoon area is now ongoing, it was enforced, but now we have to do the same also perhaps in mainland Venice. So this is a first attempt to regulate to the tourism in some way. And also we have to think about how to improve the situation with the tourism itself, not just with commuting tourism, but also, long stay tourism. So Venice could be, good as well with 70% less of the current tourists, because 30% of the tourists are the tourists that actually stay in Venice and renting a hotel room and bringing actual wealth to the city. And with the Musei Civici, now we are enjoying very good relationships. And these 30% of the tourists are those who go to Murano and they buy glass goods from traditional shops. And also they go to museums and art galleries and so on. So these 30% of long-stay tourism, this 30% that is long-stay tourism is the one that is bringing actual wealth, while 70%, which is the short-term tourism, the so-called commuting tourism, that is not bringing any wealth. It's not quality tourism. So now I do think it's important to create a system that promotes the hotel rooms booking. We need an urban development like D'Agostino used to make. There was the big Jubilee. We had some terminals ready. And also the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal is just this big inlet of the whole tourism from Piazzale Roma and from the St. Mark's Basin. And so there is an excess surplus of traffic in the Grand Canal. And so the first thing to do is to reduce the short stay tourism, like the commuting, the one-day tourism. We should reduce the one-day tourism, and we should create incentives for the hotel booking, so that we have tourists that come over, they can book a hotel, they can stay, they can actually be welcomed by a city that at the moment is not very welcoming. And so in 2 or 3 days, they can actually also get to see the Doge's Palace, the Museum Correr, Palazzo Rezzonico, and all other places. And then there is also another point, which is to bring back apartments to the residential. We have to create residential contracts for apartments. So, of course, in this way, we get to go perhaps against the interests of many people. Also, the family of my wife rents to tourists, but it is also important to rent to citizens. But the issues is also the Italian laws, because in Italy it's impossible to evict anyone from the apartments that you own. So it's a very strange law. But I hope that now the laws will improve, So if we can now establish no new laws in terms of room rental, and especially if we have Florence and Venice and other cities in Italy that want a better law to manage residential rental, I'm sure that we can find a good compromise. And also, you have to think about that now in Venice we have several shortcomings. We have no longer politics or industry here in Venice. Thank God we have culture. And we have many cultural events and also we have several institutions like Ateneo Veneto, which I'm a member of, that are proposing many cultural events. So perhaps we could bring to Venice new cultural institutions that will anyway bring wealth and good tourism and so on. Then we should also heal the wound between Venice and Mestre, because it is used to say that the waterfront is the big wound between Venice and Mestre, but that's not the case. Venice and Mestre should be one single and only body. So the last point, I am talking about this as a Venetian. In 4 years, I will retire. I'm one of the 145 people in Italy that cannot participate actively in politics, so I will talk as a Venetian. In this city, over the past 5 years, there was strong cut, a strong difference between people who live off tourism and those who do not live off tourism. And so there are some people who there was this important distinction, and this gap got worse over the years, and this is becoming this is turning into mutual hatred, and we have to heal the situation, because otherwise what we need, of course, different opinions. We can also have different visions, but all the Venetians must sit at a table and share a common possibility. And so I would like to thank you all. This is my last acknowledgement to you, because today you were able to put together many people with different opinions, many people that have a very different opinion about several things. And I also enjoyed the speech by Mr. Martini. We, have different opinions, but this time around I also have found tradition, a common point, so I would like to thank you all for this. Thank you. Thank you, Director. Yes, in Venice, this one-day tourism is an issue, but as you said, we shouldn't promote hatred, so we must be cautious in how we evaluate this definition of better tourism and of upper tourism and lower tourism. So, and also the system of the booking system. It's not easy, because sometimes, if like yesterday, Sneska said to me yesterday that I was supposed to be here today, so I couldn't book with such advance. So every now and then we need promptness. So now we have Paul Atkin that is trying to rebuild the theater of San Cassiano, that with Andromeda was the first opera, fully paid here in Europe. He would like to create devices for a Baroque style in San Cassiano, and in Glyndalhood in south of London we have another Baroque theatre, and it is difficult to propose Baroque opera, but every now and then we have some Baroque opera also in Venice, and there are also some Baroque opera programs in Scala. So I would like Mr. Atkin to talk to us about these imaginative experience, and perhaps one day we will get to hear the beautiful instruments played at the Theatre of San Cassiano.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for your kind introductory words that almost covers up half of my presentation, so that will allow us to save time. Thank you to the excellent moderators. Thank you very much to Paola for kindly inviting me here. I apologize if I continue in English because it is easier for me. Thank you.
As our excellent moderator said, the project to reconstruct the Teatro San Cassiano is something that we've been working on for 5 years now, 6 years. It may, you may wonder why we're here on this particular event, but we're talking about a project where we have something that is extinct, doesn't exist anymore, and that's where we don't want to be with Venice. It's quite unbelievable, but in Italy, a country with 3,000 theatres, the most beautiful theatres in the world, the only country in the world where you can go from the Renaissance to today, we have left behind a small, tiny Baroque theatre with the stage machinery, the ability to have the magic of the Deus Ex Machina, the special effects of the time, that really created the opera boom that led to this beautiful genre of music that is one of Italy's greatest exports, and we shouldn't forget that. This means, and it's a quite extraordinary fact, but no one living today, and for quite some time now, has ever had the pleasure of listening and watching, because we're talking about the experience of being in this very tiny theatre, just 6 rows of seating, so most of you are already outside my theatre. None of us living today have ever heard or watched an opera by Monteverdi, Cavalli, Vivaldi, Gasparini, Albinoni. I could continue with all these wonderful Venetian names. And that matters, doesn't it? It matters to all of us that we've never experienced Baroque opera and Venetian Baroque opera as we should have done, as it was written, as the composers would have heard it. And so our vision for the last 6 years, mine personally for 20 years, has been to make this possible, to create it and deliver it for Venice. I feel it's a debt I personally want to repay to Venice. And I think it's wrong that we don't hear this great genre in its natural setting. As you rightly said, the great theatres like La Scala are 3, sometimes 4 times larger, and so we just cannot stage Baroque opera with the stage machinery, with the scene sets of that era in that way. However, what does this have to do with what we're doing here today, other than the point I already made? And that is, whilst every aspect of my daily life is pursuing historical accuracy, we call it historically informed performance, esecuzione storicamente consapevole. We are living in a modern era, and so therefore, whilst every action that we do in our operation has to be modern, has to be the latest cutting edge. which means we set out a vision for a new Venice, which means this project is as much about the future as it is the past. We achieve that in a number of ways, which I'll come on to, but I think the point I want to make, if I can get this clear, is we've heard today, it's been very inspiring hearing so many of these excellent people talk about Venice with such passion. But I was struck by Anna Summers-Cox's comment about the lack of a good news story. And we have so much tragedy we talk about, and she is sadly right. People are not coming to Venice. The type of people who want to come to Venice are beginning not to come. And we have problems we have to conflict. So we need a good news story. And in this sense, I feel our project is the perfect flagship for this new rebirth of Venice, this resurgence of this fantastic city so soon after COVID. You know, when we talk about the San Cassiano, it was built directly after the peste, the plagues of the time. So we know about this in our work. You know, there is a reason why a box in Venice has 2 petitions either side, why people are protected. We hadn't thought about that before the plague, before the COVID. So we feel we offer a good news story. We feel, more importantly, that we represent Venice in the sense that this idea started off as an impossible dream, crazy. I was laughed at as the mad English professor, whatever. But it's actually a very simple project. It's just a wooden theatre that needs to be built. We have identified where we want to build it. We think we have the backers to come in and help us. We need more, but we think we can do this. And actually, in 4 years, we could be actually open and celebrating this Venetian genre, which I must add, we talk about the wonderful tangible assets of Venice, but let's not forget the patrimonio immateriale, the intangible assets of our partner in the Marciana, who has 300 manuscripts that we don't get to hear, 10,000 libretti. We have the great Venetian composers of the past that are lost, but they were the best composers of their day, and they were the best librettos by the best poets of the day. So we have an intangible asset that we want to recover. Once we deliver the theatre in 4 years' time, and we can do that, it's really not that difficult, we have a good news story about Venice. We have something to celebrate. We have something to drive forward all of these valuable environmental programs. And in that respect, as I said, our operation is very modern in that we have taken the route of, well, it's very modern, but it's also historically informed. The reason we celebrate the San Cassiano is it's the first theatre, a commercial theatre in the world, the first time that everybody could go to the party. And we celebrate the Brothers Tron for that festival. But nonetheless, the models, therefore we have followed this same theory going forward. I'm a businessman as well as a musicologist. I've spent 35 years in London as a businessman. And I don't like to come to people with an idea. I like to come to people with an idea which has a model or 2 models that prove this can work. We have them in London through the Shakespeare's Globe. We have them in Lewis in the countryside by a not so famous opera theatre here called the Glyndebourne. Both operate privately. They're not commercial entities, but they came out with new ideas 20 years ago, and now we take those ideas and we ride with them. And although we're a commercial entity, it's very important. I think the newer generation are showing us that the world is about not keeping to fixed boxes, letting these labels go a bit. I think Vittorio said it very well. So we are about public-private partnerships, commercial and government partnerships. We're about working together because we could spend all day arguing, is the San Cassiano a reconstruction, a restoration, or is it a new build? It does not matter. What matters is we are rebuilding the Teatro San Cassiano, where we can celebrate Baroque opera in a way that is not possible today. There are no such theatres in the world today. So if I move quickly on to our aspects of how we want to make that happen, I'm a very practical, simple chap. We work in 3 areas, and I spend my days talking about this. I obviously would like to talk about music, but I spend my days talking about regeneration, which is so vital, impact, which is so important for our children, and sustainability, which is so important for Venice. In terms of regeneration, we have now worked with 27 different Venetian companies. When our theatre will be open, we will employ at least 160 Venetian employees. Venice has a problem with population, we know. You address that by giving employment, by looking at, in our case, much of our work, of course, will be with artisans. We will build our own scenery, we will paint our own cloths, we will make our own costumes. We will regenerate these lost artisans and these lost skills. But also, we invest in creating a small cottage industry, is the phrase in English. I'm not sure how that translates, but a small industry in Venice which gives employment. If I move on to, obviously, when we build the theatre in that area, which I can't share yet, I will when we can, we have the opportunity to work with our community. We want to be a good partner to our community. We want to work hard. And one of the things that makes a good musician, and by the way, I'm not a good musician, but one of the things that makes a good musician is the ability to listen. So we come here today, and we come here all the time, not saying we have the answers, but saying we have a great idea. Please help us. We're willing to listen. We want to do this project for Venice, but we have always set as our driving force a project that we do with Venetians. And I think even more importantly, we do with young Venetian people who have a future. And that's why our impact projects are so important. We've already started having webinars with schools in Venice. The Marco Polo was a recent success. We have policies to take our music into the schools and to have performances where the children can come back with our professionals and stand on the stage and perform to their parents and let this theatre become a Venetian theatre. Our planned site will be where we will try and create an atmosphere of Campo del Teatro, an open area where Venetians can come daily, where there are no doors locked, where we will set out outside of the theatre in the summer a plan of the theatre itself, because it's so tiny you really can't believe it. As I say, the platea is just 6 rows deep. There is this magnificent wall of 153 boxes, 10 meters high, and for those people who are interested, I have brought my model today, and perhaps at the lunch break I'm happy to show anyone who wants to see it. It's quite fascinating. But we will create this Campo del Teatro where Venetian people, we have already a partnership with the Carta Venezia Unica, can come for free with our app and watch the screen and listen to the opera and feel it. I first heard Pavarotti in London as an 18-year-old student, just walking by, seeing the big screen at the Covent Garden, being struck by the brilliance of the man for 2 minutes, shrugging my shoulders, moving on, completely unaware that my life had changed. This is how we embrace the young and how we embrace people through. The theatre will be permanently open during days of rehearsals for Venetians. We will have a facility for tourists, but they will have to pay, but Venetians will come in free, and make that pledge now. And we want it to be their theatre. Within the impact programs, of course, we talk about divulgazione, education and outreach projects, because it has to be, as I say, that this plan. We then come on to sustainability. Well, we know the model of tourism doesn't work today. We know that we need a good touristic model, and we know that our patrons, when they come to Venice, they come and spend 2 or 3 days here. They will enjoy our opera. We've already spoken to other Venetian theatres about partnership and tickets so that they go to their opera the next day, or their theatre the next day. We want to share. Music is about listening to other people and sharing, and so that's our philosophy. And we, therefore, don't pose a threat to anybody. We bring more trade, we bring more people who care about culture and who are interested in Venice. We talk always about the opera, but of course we also have sacred Baroque music that we want to evolve and develop. The oratorio, the Italian oratorio, is one of the greatest gifts of the world that's almost entirely lost. We can work with various churches to perform that there and to, again, reinvest in our community. In terms of building the theatre, it's a wooden theatre. We have our project. I wish I could say more, I can't. But we will target a carbon negative build. I suspect we will only deliver a carbon neutral, but we will try. I feel we are obliged to try. I was talking about carbon negativity 3 years ago, and I was laughed down. Now we think we are trying for it. We have to. We really have to. We have no choice. We then talk about sustainability. The tourism model is obviously more sustainable if we have the right type of tourists. More importantly, the infrastructure I outlined in regeneration is even more important because we have employment for Venetians in Venice. And then we talk about, obviously, how we operate the theatre, and of course, that has to be, again, itself on a carbon neutral basis. I don't think, as a businessman for 35 years in London, I don't think we have a choice. And I'm not talking just about Venice, I'm talking about the world. I don't think we have a choice. As for Venice, the communities, the important officers here, I would just like to say, people abroad often think it's difficult working in Venice. I have nothing but praise for all the officers. I already owe a great debt for the fact that they listened to some stuck-up foreigner coming into their country with some stupid idea. Thanks to them, thanks to the Venetians, this has gone from an impossible dream to something that was feasible, to something that within 4 years we can open and will be sustainable. I really feel that together we can make this happen, and I thank you for your time, and I thank you all for your time. Thank you.
Grazie, Paul.
Thank you, Paul Atkin, for these. So I really hope to be seeing very soon, perhaps the soprano will not be Danielle Denise, but we'll see the coronation of Popper very soon with great opera singers. So for the Port Authority of the North Adriatic Sea, we have a connection with Mr. Revedin. Yes, so thank you. I would like to leave you the floor.
Grazie.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, one and all. Thank you very much for this invitation. I would also like to thank you on behalf of Mr. de Blasio, who is the president of the Port Authority. Today he is at the municipality council, so he couldn't be here, but I would like to thank you all on his behalf. So, in 2021, there were new laws and regulations that were established and that added up to the current situation of local laws. And because of these new laws, there will be new changes, historical changes that are about to be brought upon the port of Venice. The port of Venice. The first one is the first law is about this idea contribution. So we will have a two-stage, a sort of competition. And in the first one, there will be the several suggestions. In the second stage, we will evaluate the economical possibilities of the several proposals, so that so that we will be able to establish a port outside the lagoon waters for bigger tonnage ships, transoceanic ships. So this is the third stage for Venice. The first stage was the stage of a port within the city itself. The second stage was the port of the 900s of the 20th century with the Maritime port and Marghera port. That was a port for the whole Veneto region. And so now with this new law, we have a new horizon coming up, a new port outside the protected lagoon waters. So it's a delocalization project. This announcement of competition that was launched last June 29th is a competition that is extremely complex because the first phase that will end by next December will be just to discuss about ideas. So the second stage will be about the shortlisted best 3 ideas that will deal with the feasibility, the technical feasibility of the ideas. Thus, these will provide us with a very clear design of the future port of Venice. There is another act that perhaps you all know, and it also brought change, a historical change, which is the Venice Decree, which is the one to avoid big cruise ships to cross the St. Mark's Canal and Giudecca Canal. From August the 1st, it is not allowed, it is prohibited, the crossing of cruise ships bigger than 25,000 tons or with an air draft bigger than 35 meters, excluding yachts with masts. And also, there will be some regulations about the sulfur emissions. So the commissioner of the Port Authority is also the one who will take care of the possibilities of in terms of the new pontoons. We will have 5 new pontoons in the Marghera area and in the cruise ship area 2022. For cruise ships that are bigger than 25,000 tons. So there will also be some maintenance of the existing canals, and there will also be some improvement in terms of the cruise ship crossings. So also, together with the ministry, the concerning ministry, we now have 3 possible solutions in Marghera. 2 of these possible solutions are in the current container terminal, and another one is in the north terminal. But in that case, the actual feasibility would require more time, about 2 or 3 years, to build the proper pontoons. Again, for ships shorter than 240 meters, now a viable solution is the Fusina port. The port, with the new board that was established last year, is now taking into consideration these changes. And this is very important because now the new board will have to take into consideration this big change for the port system in the harbor system in Venice. And so we will have to redefine the route to a new delocalized port for bigger ships. So this has to take into consideration the current port situation, and at the same time, we will also need the proper funding. So the port, the economic fabric all around the port must stay alive until the new port, the new delocalized port, is ready. This route also takes into consideration sustainability under any possible viewpoint. It is important to be compatible with environment, and it has also to be acceptable at a social level. So we use the best technological knowledge in order to put forward to highlight the importance of Venice and its lagoon. This operative plan, 3-year operative plan, we are now drawing up. It will start from the beginning of October. We will start involving the whole area together with the associations, including the associations that are participating to today's event. So we will have some meetings and some online meetings to exchange ideas and to make our planning as close as possible to the actual demand, not only the economic demand, but any possible demand from our area, from our territory. I would like to thank you all as a Venetian for the great work that the committees are carrying out within the city today and the past few years. I am a Venetian myself, so as a Venetian, I also have the luck to work in Venice. So I would also say that I have the luck to work in Venice, also thanks to the port. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. So this is now we have the last two speeches. First, we have Mr. Michele Bugliesi, former rector of Ca' Foscari University. This time we have him as a chairman of the Venezia Foundation. I'm online, yes, online speech, so I would like to leave him the floor. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this invitation. I would like to thank the two co-chairwomen, Paola and Ms. Mihailovic. So I was stricken by the speech by Mr. Paul Atkin that I would like to say hello to him. It was a very poetic vision, but at the same time it was a very concrete vision. What I would like to say is something different. Perhaps I will be, I will be provoking you all about some points that, and also already Carlos Carpa has touched upon some of the points that I'm about to speak. So what I'm perceiving, what I'm feeling, is that often during these debates we have a very romantic vision of the city. But I believe that I'm not Venetian, but I'm a new resident of Venice. I decided to live in the city center, and I would never change my life. I'm very satisfied. This is a great place to live your life. So I think that we have to come to terms with the time of the residents. And as I said, it's an aging layer of society. I myself am an aged person, like Scarpa mentioned. So this again, there is this very static vision of the city. We always pile up knowledge about history and blah blah, and so we have this vision of this beauty of the city, but. So it's important we need to focus not just in the beautiful Venice, but also we have to focus on the Venice for everyone. For instance, its great food and everything that you can enjoy about the city. So we have to think about the modernity of this city. At the moment, there is the depletion of the residential fabric, and that's a big issue because, and also there is the environmental issue. We have to avoid the idea of an open air museum. This city is not an open air museum. If you row your rowboat in the Grand Canal, many tourists take pictures of you because it looks very picturesque. But this is actually rowing boats is something that the Venetians have been doing for ages. It was like it's Venetian jogging. To Venetians, jogging tantalizes boat rowing. So we need to keep the old residents and we need to invite new residents. So rather than being just a unique, beautiful city, we must create a city that attracts new generations. And finally, now sustainability, making Venice the European capital of sustainability, the Bauhaus of the sea's capital, and new funds that will be available. Finally, we are coming to action, not just words. But again, engineers, artists, entrepreneurs, they must understand how to make this city appealing. This is a beautiful city where everybody would love to work. So then what is the point? It is to create good work condition for anyone. I teach at Ca' Foscari University, and I was rector for 6 years. And during those 6 years, I thought, what could I do in order to have my graduate students to stay, to live more, to stay in the city? And thanks to Ca' Foscari and IUAV University, the Architecture University, it was possible to keep some of the graduate students in the city. But most of them leave the city because there is not a future of big callings of professionalism here in Venice. So there are some possibilities for an economic renaissance. So craftsmanship is very important. Artisanship is very important So, talking about the San Cassiano Theatre, we had an idea of what implies to talk about culture, to do something about culture. There is a beautiful book that I would like, that I think many of you know it, by Farifa Afra, and that is portraying the number of residents and the number of craftsmen in Venice. So for every artisan enterprise, we have 20 resident people, 20 citizens of Venice. So now the again, if we do not increase the number of residents, we will not be able to increase the number of artisans' activities, artisans' enterprises. And, you know, this city also requires a lot of maintenance, but also small-scale maintenance. And so artisans, several artisans, are very helpful. So, and then there is also the world of the startups. And it's becoming an important leverage in terms of concrete job creation. And of course, we will never be able to be as big as Israel or Silicon Valley for IT. But if we now the mental attitude of our kids has changed. The new, the young people are starting up many new enterprises, and the average numbers are very good. So now we have a better vision of growing up. But this happens a lot in Lombardy and in Trentino. But so there are not many startups in Veneto as there are in Lombardy or Trentino. Perhaps Padova is better from that particular standpoint. But so there are also now life sciences that is one of the initiatives that we are focusing on also with proper funding, and that life science initiatives are being carried out in Mestre. And then perhaps Paola knows already about the activity of speeding up the many. So there are also new opportunities in the so-called built environment. So we can attract young people. So it is important to think of the city in romantic terms, but also in concrete terms. Of course, this is not just an issue of Venice. We are a city of water and a beautiful city, an historical city. But we have to say that many issues that we have, many gaps that we have between Venice and Mestre are perhaps the same gaps that you have in Paris center and the outer circles of Paris, or Rome center, Rome inner circle, and Rome outer circle. So of course, there are some gaps, but in Venice, perhaps this gap is stronger because the city center is so small. But Venice is so small that we cannot accept big enterprises, big firms, big companies. But then perhaps we have Porto Marghera, that was a huge disaster from so many viewpoints in the 20th century. And now we have to redevelop Porto Marghera so that there are no more emissions in the lagoon. We need some the works to claim those areas. So, but I agree with Claudio. So, Venice in Venice, we do not need controversy. We need to find new job posts, engineers, bioengineers, biotechnologists. But of course, again, I'm not talking about Venice Center because finding facilities for that is difficult. The arsenal is not easy to access, so the investments would be too big and too complicated to manage. If you speak to any experimental scientist, they will tell you that it's not easy to use the arsenal. So again, the reason why Ca' Foscari brought the scientific initiatives in Mestre had that kind of sense, that kind of meaning. So what do I mean? I mean that it is important to invest in the metropolitan area of Venice because we have regulations, we have funds to improve and redevelop the situation of Porto Marghera. So we can recreate the economy with hydrogen, with bio technologies, with fine chemistry, with new materials, with pharmaceutical science, with life science. These are fields that can bring new residents to Venice. So we have funded several initiatives to promote telework. But if we want to promote the arrival of many more companies, then we have to focus on what I just said. Otherwise, we will only have same-day tourists coming over. So we need a sort of compensation or sort of offset. We need to offset the same-day tourism with other possibilities coming out of residency. But of course, if we create the right conditions, also in fiscal terms, I'm sure that we can find so many solutions because we have the most beautiful skyline of the world. So if we are able to link all the ideas of new entrepreneurs with the airport, the port, the historical city. So you can live in the city of water, and then you can commute going to Mestre every day to work in the technological sector. One last thing, as Claudio Scarpa was saying, we will be able to attract new people in new sectors in sectors that will characterize the economic development of the next decades. Yes, but we also have to put the basis for a good quality of life. Also because if you are in your 20s or in your 30s and you have children, you cannot spend your time to reach sports centers because there is just one sports center there is in the outer circle of the city. So it's important also to create facilities for the young couples that want to stay in Venice, or like students that want, the graduates that want to stay in Venice, or people that just want to come and live in Venice. And so it's important to create facilities that can be used by citizens, by residents. And so it's important to establish processes that are concrete. And again, we must have a vision, a concrete vision, not the romantic vision that people that are outside Venice think of. We need to be very down to earth and be very concrete in our action. Thank you very much.
Questa è una visione molto chiara.
Thank you very much for this very clear vision. This is the opposite of John Ruskin's Venice, but this is a Venice with very clear coordinates to withhold young people and students with this idea of development, considering the historical city as a place where you go to sleep, the contrary of what people do in Milan, in other words. Right. Now, Francesca Scatto, President of the 6th Committee, Regional Council of the Veneto region. She's connected with us online. Please, Francesca Scatto, you have the floor, and this will conclude our morning.
Proviamo? Ecco.
Are we connected?
Non si sente? Chiedo ai tecnici se vogliamo provare oppure... Yes, yes, it's possible. Io non riesco a comunicare con lei.
I'm sorry, we have no way to communicate with Francesca. Maybe our technologists can help us, or we can postpone this contribution to the early afternoon. Mrs. Scotto, can you hear me? Yes, thank you. So if you agree, we can conclude now our morning. We can break for lunch, and in about 45 minutes when we start again, you will be the first speaker. Is that okay for you? Thank you very much. So see you in 45 minutes. Now we break for lunch for 45 minutes, and we will reconvene here to listen to Mrs. Francesca Scatto. Thank you.
Trust in me, just in me. Close your eyes trust in me. Close your
Un ulteriore, grazie. Allora, if you have left your ID with the hostesses for the headsets, you are kindly requested to take your IDs back. Se avete lasciato in deposito la vostra carta d'identità